Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group, and we're going to have a pretty small group today. We've got probably three-quarters of the study group list at ILTCI today, but um, I think this is a good time to cover a topic that I get asked to do pretty regularly. Somebody just asked me to do it not too long ago. I try to do it once a year. You hear that from me a lot, but we're going to have the rate increase talk today. And I've written on this topic before at my old position at a BGA that was working with wealth advisors, financial advisors. I got these calls a lot because there were folks, again, rubber kind of meets the road on a plan, and a client has got a rate increase, and they really don't know how to consult on that when something like that happens. And I can totally understand the trepidation when you get notice that a client's going to get a rate increase letter, or a client has already gotten one and reaches out to you and says, "Hey, what's the deal with this?" It can be a pretty intimidating scenario because all of a sudden you're dealing with a client who has kind of a negative emotion around something you have helped them put in place, right? So it's not a discussion that we're generally really excited to have, but it's important that we're able to execute really, really well on the conversation and kind of understand how we set ourselves up to make sure that conversation is one that is much more understood before it even happens. So I'm just going to talk through a little bit of it. As I said when I sent out the agenda, I think the rate increase conversation is just as much about empathy, psychology, as it is about crunching the numbers. And I definitely stand by that because um, as I've said with other study group sessions, even when we talk about, say, declines, right? You have a situation that you need to diffuse before you can get a solution. And even with, for example, the self-funding conversation, you have to kind of defuse anything adversarial before you can start pulling on the same end of the rope. And I think that's no different here. There's a lot of emotional, psychological work that you've got to go through before you can help a client understand how to move forward with their rate increase. But first and foremost, I think the the first way we can make sure our rate increase consultation conversations are a bit more positive or at least a bit less negative is preparing a client ahead of time. If you're going to be selling them a product that is not guaranteed premiums, not guaranteed. So if there's any possibility of a rate increase at all, we should be covering that early on in the sale, the initial sale, in the conversation. We have to kind of set up our future by talking about a lot of these things. And that's no different than, say, talking to a client about underwriting, right? There's a possibility that we're approved, there's a possibility that we're declined, right? And I have options lined up for you should we be declined, right? We have backups. That is setting up a future conversation of a client potentially being declined. So there's no bad surprises. Same thing with rate increases. You can say that these plans are designed with, uh, designed in a way where premiums are, the objective is to keep premiums level, but it is not guaranteed. I can't sit across the table from you and guarantee that there will not ever be a rate increase on this plan. That is a distinct possibility. And I think when you help a client to understand that ahead of time and get them to still understand why this product may be their best fit and it may be their preference to go forward with this product, given that there's a possibility of rate increases, as long as you drive that home, that will help set you up for a less negative conversation in the future. And I think it's important to teach a client how rate increases can even happen, right? at the end of the day, it's not like a carrier can roll out of bed and say, I'm going to levy a rate increase and start sending out letters, right? So I think when we're able to explain that a carrier has to petition the state insurance department of each state and actually show evidence that they are essentially paying out way more in claims than they're taking in premiums, and the rate increase is necessary for that reason, among other reasons. And when you mention that the state insurance department can approve or deny that rate increase, or approve a rate increase, but not at the level that the carrier asks for, I think that's important for a number of reasons. It helps the client know, okay, the carrier can't just do this willy-nilly, but if they do actually try to levy a rate increase, the state insurance department, which is, designed to be a watchdog for the consumer and is designed to look out for the consumer in cases like this, with them kind of having the final say, that makes me feel a little bit better. To know that they're going to, help regulate what the carrier can actually get on a rate increase on my plan, and to know that they can't give a rate increase to just me. It's about their experience on the entire policy block, the entire block of business. Those are things that just help give your client a little bit more insight and understand how the process works, and to understand that there is some regulation to this, and it's not just going to be something that's completely out of everybody's control. And if the carrier wants to do it, they can do it. That helps you a lot. So I think what you do in the very beginning, in the initial sale, can help make that conversation better on the back end. But also, we may go 10, 15, 20 years before we see any rate increases on a plan that you sell today, right? So the client is going to forget a lot of this information, but at least CYA, right? Document that in the conversation that you've talked about this in the past, and of course, be able to offer them a refresher. But let's say we have a client that's in front of us that's gotten a rate increase and they are not happy about it. Their first reaction overall is going to be emotional, 99.9% of the time. They're not going to think like us when it comes to seeing a rate increase, right? So the first thing to do is to really show empathy, help the client understand that they've got somebody on their side that's going to advocate for them, but say, yeah, it stinks to have a rate increase on a plan. And of course, when we bought this policy XYZ number of years ago, we talked about the fact that there could be a rate increase, but that didn't mean that a rate increase was guaranteed. So it is unfortunate to know that we're going to have to pay a bit more in premium to be able to keep the plan at its same benefits. Just understand and acknowledge that emotional aspect, and that will help a bit to soothe what they're going through. But of course, it's not going to fix everything. You have to be there to provide a solution. You have to be there to be able to provide advice. And I think also helping people understand a little bit about long-term care's history as an insurance product can really help give some understanding too, and help them understand why they're getting this rate increase. So especially if you're dealing with legacy long-term care policies, you're dealing with older Genworth plans, you're dealing with CNAs, you're dealing with older John Hancock plans, you can talk a little bit about the fact that long-term care as an insurance industry is an infant compared to things like life insurance, compared to things like homeowners, compared to all other types of insurance out there. This is a relatively new type of insurance compared to some of the ones that have been around forever, right? And when an industry is new, these legacy plans are closer to when the industry was really first getting started. Um, there had to be an initial pricing of the product, an initial actuarial science kind of put into these plans, an initial um, just the key word is assumptions, right? And one of the ways that we kind of made mistakes as an industry in pricing these products early on is that we assumed that more people were going to drop this plan or drop their long-term care plan than actually did. Turns out, surprise, surprise, people saw the value in their long-term care policies, held on to them, and claimed on them. And what that resulted in is because we built in too many lapse assumptions, policies went out the door underpriced, and people still claimed on those policies. So that's why the carrier is in a position to be able to ask for those rate increases. But from your perspective, Mr. or Mrs. Client, I have to congratulate you on making a great decision to buy this long-term care plan when you did, because at the end of the day, you bought an underpriced long-term care plan. You bought a plan that was giving away far more value than what the premiums were being paid for at the end of the day. You are essentially receiving a gold mine tax by seeing this rate increase. Again, the state insurance departments don't just approve a rate increase because somebody walks up and asks for it, right? There has to be significant evidence that these plans were underpriced and they're going backwards as far as claims paid out versus premiums taken in at the end of the day. So know that it's not often in the insurance industry that the consumer gets a major one up on the carrier and gets something that's drastically underpriced in this way. And so you made a savvy financial decision. I think a little compliment about that. The reason you're in this situation is because you made a good decision and you actually got one up on the carrier, which doesn't happen often. I think that's a good way to put a client in perspective of, okay, I see. I've had the benefit of a plan that's essentially discounted from what it really should have been sold at, and I've been paying a discounted premium for years and years. And at the end of the day, when a rate increase is improved or is approved, it is not going to be approved at a level that will get the carrier all of their value back, right? They can't levy a rate increase that would be like going out on the market and buying new business. They can't raise your premiums that much. We haven't seen it, to that level. So you will still, after this rate increase, be paying essentially a discounted premium, right? So that's another important piece to know. And I think just like some of our study group presenters, like Rhonda or Linda would say in a situation like this, is remember why we bought this plan in the first place. Remember the initial conversations we had around long-term care planning. You wanted to do this so that you could fund professional care so that your children wouldn't have to take care of you if you needed extended care, right? Remind them of the initial objective they had when they purchased this plan. Let them know that the reason they're seeing a rate increase is because they've gotten a really great deal for years and years. And let them know that after the rate increase, they're still going to have a great deal. Now, excuse me, I don't know if anybody has any experience um, in general in working with lots and lots of rate increases. So let me know if your situation is different. But when I had rate increase consultations with agents or with clients in my old position, I found that generally about 99% of people ended up paying the rate increase. They ended up taking the full rate increase, keeping their benefits in place exactly as they were, and didn't worry about things like reducing benefits. Now, there were, of course, a few situations where folks all of a sudden, in the time they purchased the plan to the time they're getting the rate increase, they were put on a fixed income that is perhaps less than what they were bringing in the door when they were still working. The budget doesn't work anymore to pay any higher premium on their plan. So I did see some clients reduce benefits a bit to keep it at the original premium. But you have to remember also that you have to let the client know in that scenario, this does not mean just because we've made an adjustment one time or paid the rate increase one time that there couldn't be another one. There is a potential for a rate increase after you've already had one. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And if you'd like to make the decision that you're set on now and understand that we'll have to figure something out the next time around, if something like that happens, um, then so be it. But in my experience, I found that most people paid the rate increase if they could, comfortably afford it. Because at the end of the day, we've set up the conversation with understanding the value of what you have. The value of your plan is so good that the carrier is going to mom and dad at the state insurance department and asking for a rate increase because, you know, they're really getting taken for a ride on the value of your plans. The fact that people have held those plans also says they have value. And there's been a lot of claims, which means the insurance company's keeping their promises. So a lot of those things add up to people just paying the rate increase. And a lot of how that's done is by crunching the numbers. So I've talked a lot about how to actually hold the conversation, what emotional position the client may be in at the time of receiving the rate increase and how to kind of empathize and move forward in those situations. But there is some crunching the numbers to go through. You're going to want to show the client how good of a value they actually have in their plan. So that's generally done by doing a couple of different comparisons. So, number one, you can compare what it would be like for this client to go out on the market and purchase a plan in new business today. Okay. That is one of the ways you can do it. And of course, there's a lot of products with guaranteed premiums out there. So some clients may be interested in switching to, say, a hybrid plan that would lock in their premiums for life. Um, but at the end of the day, I think showing them the product that they have, like for example, if this is on a traditional long-term care case and you show them at your age today, if you left this plan and went to another plan, oftentimes you see premiums of 3 to 4 times or more what they're paying if we want to keep all the benefits equal. And in some cases, with much older legacy plans, 5% compound inflation was drastically underpriced, or we see lifetime unlimited benefits on those plans, which, we're really running out of places to be able to even access lifetime unlimited benefits on the market for new business today. So part of it is helping the client understand, you may have benefits in this plan that you actually can't go out and purchase today depending on a number of factors. And if you could, you'll see that premiums are multiple times more expensive on an annual or monthly basis to be able to purchase those benefits. But, that may draw an objection of, well, of course, I'm 15 to 20 years older than I was when I purchased this policy. You can even go back and show them at their issue age what it would be like to try to get benefits equal to what they have in new business today. And you'll see, even for their issue age, if you were 45 when you bought this plan, look at what they're trying to charge a 45-year-old today for the same benefits or as close to the same benefits as we can get. And they will understand, okay, they did actually underprice me when I was age 45, back 20 years ago, right? So I think comparing that shows that, okay, the industry has had rate increases under its belt. It's had those actuarial assumptions that didn't quite pan out under its belt. And knowing all the information they know about those mistakes that were made in pricing, here's what they're trying to charge today for new business. That will help people understand real quick. Oh, I'm actually really good where I am, and I actually did make a pretty darn good decision to purchase this policy 20 years ago. Um, and that really helps people understand maybe I should just pay the rate increase because even if I pay the full increase, I'm still not even getting close to what it would be to go out and try to buy another plan on the market today. Even if I wanted to lock in my premiums, that policy is going to be a good deal more expensive or it's going to require a single premium. And of course, I don't have a large return of premium in the plan that I'm in that's getting the rate increase. So, yeah, I'm kind of in this. I've paid my premiums into it. I have really good benefits on the other end. I might as well keep that going. And I think it's always important when you're doing a rate increase consultation, get a copy of the letter, get a copy of the options that they have. You want to make sure that if you have any advance notice that a client's going to be receiving a rate increase, you get out in front of it and say, when you get that letter from the carrier, let's get together. I need to get eyes on that and we can walk through those options because there's a couple of items to that. Number one, I'm sure many of you have seen a rate increase letter before where it gives you kind of anywhere from 3 to 5 options on a page that will say, pay the full increase or drop the inflation protection or drop the number of years or drop the monthly benefit, change the plan design around a little bit in general, dropping your benefit. And here's the premium you would pay if you went with this plan design. Um, I'm just going to say that the carrier picks those options and they are kind of just a static menu of options when you're just looking at that page. And the carrier is generally not going to offer much that is going to be really beneficial to the client. Those options are to help the carrier, probably more than they are to help the client, right? We're helping the client and giving them options to reduce their premiums, but generally the drop in value that's realized from selecting one of those options is not equal to the amount of premium savings. You're sacrificing much more value in exchange for maybe a couple $100 a year of premium taken off of your bill. So that's important to walk through, but you also have to understand that what is on that menu of options is not always the only options available to the client. So if you call into the carrier with the client, and really ask further about your options, or if you have a specific option in mind that you want to see. Hey, I have 5% compound on this plan. What would happen if I dropped to 3% compound or 1% compound? I didn't see that on the rate increase letter. Is that an option that's available? Oftentimes, they'll want to make sure that you're on the phone with the client when you call in and ask about those things, but they can generally provide some sort of illustration around what the premium would be if you were able to do that. So don't just take the options in the rate increase letter as these are all my options, and don't let a client go through those options alone because there are, and I don't know your guys' experience, but there are some pretty predatory options, in my opinion, that are listed in some of these rate increase letters. We're starting to see now that a stable premium option is included in a number of these different rate increase letters that say, we'll keep your premium stable for 10 years if you choose this option, right? And you'll have a bit of a reduced rate increase, but for 5 years, 10 years, we can't raise your rate. And that tends to be, I would say, tempting for a client to say, oh, I know I don't have to deal with rate increases for 5 or 10 years. But what happens on year 6 or year 11 is out of their control, right? And they may be in a situation where, a rate increase is even more untenable. for their financial situation. So that's one important thing to note. And you could be paying a stable premium option, and there may not even be a rate increase in that first 5 or 10 years. So it's not always the best option. It can be a very um, you know, it can be a very tempting option, but it's not always the best. Let's see what Diane says here. I think we need to use our words carefully when discussing the much higher cost of plans today. We don't want the next generation to be so discouraged that they don't ever consider planning. I totally agree. You know, it's important, making that comparison is important, not so much to say plans today are so expensive. They're still providing great value for the dollar. And of course, with cost of living increases, things like that, we expect new business rates to go up kind of regardless over time. It is more to show, look at what a great deal you have as opposed to look how expensive things are today. I totally agree with that because at the end of the day, if the client ends up claiming on that policy, the value is kind of immeasurable to that client, and it does feed down into the next generation and the next generation and the next generation, understanding the importance of having coverage, being able to fund professional care. So I totally agree. It's that comparison is more for, you know, you have a great deal in your hands today.
Hey,
Um,
Jason, could you open for a little input?
yeah, yeah, go for it, Gene.
Yeah. I agree with several things you said before. One of them is I think it's important to remind people how smart they were to do what they did. I mean, we all know there used to be what, 40, 50, 60 insurance companies offering this insurance, Jason, in the
Yep.
past. Now we're down on traditional, maybe five or six. It wasn't because they're making too much money, was it? Okay. We call progress in this country living longer. And we've been given that ability to live longer, faster than anybody's been able to figure it out. Insurance companies, Medicare, Social Security. That's why they're all financially challenged here. And we have to remind people of that. I think the initial reaction people have is they've had a fixed premium, they had a policy for 10, 15, 20 years, and now they get an 8 or 9 page letter. And on the first page, it says something about a rate increase, and they're reading the rest of the letter with tears in their eyes, so to speak. Nobody likes to see a rate
Yeah.
increase. So I think it's important to remind them just how smart they were to do what they did. The other thing I've found, and I've been dealing with more of these rate increases than I'd like to discuss, people forget a lot about those policies, including the fact that they've had inflation growth. So when you tell them that their benefits may be doubled or more than that, they had no idea. And
100%.
if we remind them they've got premium waiver, one of the first questions I ask when I get on the call is, how old are we? And when somebody tells me they're 75, they're 80, they're 85, and yeah, I've been doing this a long time, I ask them how their health is doing. And when I hear about what's going on there, I say, you might need this sooner rather than later. And if we make any changes here, I can never put them back. So it's putting things in perspective, realizing their initial reaction is more of an emotional one than a necessary one. And, emotional reactions are short term. We have them, we get over them. We have to help them to get over it. And like you said a few moments ago, they've got other options. Maybe they don't need the inflation growth on there any longer because they needed it when they were maybe 60. But when you're 80, do you really need inflation growth on a policy? So there are options the insurance company doesn't show them that we can easily help them to grasp and understand. But it's helping to get over that initial emotional reaction, I find that tremendously helps me in enabling them to keep the benefits as they are or make the appropriate adjustments. That's what I
100%.
want. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I love what you said there, and I think what you said is important, and we're not going to get anywhere if we don't, uh, you know, recognize and empathize with the client that, look, it sucks to find out that you're going to have to pay more to keep the same of what you have. That's never a fun situation for anyone. Even us with the insight of new business pricing and our kind of professional logic around the matter, um, I can still understand that that stinks. I wouldn't be happy if I got a rate increase letter at the end of the day, even knowing what I know. So I think just understanding that and helping them kind of sail through the inevitable mandatory negative emotion that starts off this process, that's when we can start to get them open to a bit of the logic and understanding. So, um, Raymond in the chat says, what is your specific experience with what you said, predatory pricing? What do you think is predatory? If predatory, what recommendations would you recommend? I just think when you get the rate increase letter and you get those, say, 4 to 5 options available to you, there are some options that look attractive if you're not reading between the lines and really, really benefit the carrier, right? So, um, like those stable premium options, I just really had distaste for those options as they were sort of entering the market, so to speak, in that we'll keep your premiums level for X number of years, but it's not a guarantee that you'll never have a rate increase again. And it's not a guarantee that whatever rate increases they were going to try to get in that 5 or 10 years of stable premium, they won't try to just layer rate on to the 11th year, right? So I think those can be um, options that are a bit of a trap, for lack of a better way of saying it. And I think there are options that um, really strip a lot of value from the plan in a disproportionate exchange of premium savings. Now, if we need to save premium somewhere, we need to save premium somewhere, and that's where I would recommend, again, calling into the carrier with the client and trying to walk through what benefits, like Gene was saying, can we limit the inflation protection, and maybe we have other options that are a bit more palatable to us than just what the carrier offers us and they hope we pick, to check out to see if there's kind of a more equitable solution, right? Because if we're stripping, say, a year of benefit period off of a plan that has, you know, $250 a day of benefit, we're stripping a lot of policy value off. And if that's only in exchange for a couple $100 a year in premium, the value you're giving to the carrier in exchange for surrendering some of that benefit is not equal to the value you would realize in saved premiums if this is truly about trying to find the best value and not about I absolutely need to save some dollars here or there, or I cannot financially hold on to this policy at all. We don't want a situation where a client feels like they need to surrender their entire policy, but we also don't want to be in a scenario where we're having to give up tons of benefit just to save a bit of premium, right? So if the client has um, that understanding and they have kind of the financial flexibility, that's why I see so many people just paying the rate increase instead of taking one of the options. But sometimes we're in a position where we need to take one of the options and we got to look beyond just the rate increase letter to try to find something that's amicable based on the client's situation. Good questions, good thoughts. Anybody else have anything they want to share as far as how they approach this specific conversation? I know if you've been in this business a while, there's no way you're not having this conversation with maybe not regularity, but at least a few times a year. So if anybody has any tips, best practices, or things that really work well for them, specific ways you run comparisons, how you walk clients through the options, anything like that, feel free to share.
Jason, I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Is Are there any of our tools that would help people with the rate increase conversation?
Yeah, I think so.
Financial.
I think we're doing some work under the hood with Benefit Buddy right now. And if you're a regular user, you may have seen some of that. But I think the Benefit Buddy tool can be a really powerful way to do those comparisons, or our quick quote tool, because you can stack up the value of what you have that is receiving a rate increase, and you can even show the premium after the rate increase and the benefits you have versus what it would look like to go out and get something on the market today. You can also do that issue age comparison that I was talking about. Of course, I can't put you in a time machine and make you 45 again because you're 65 today, but just get a look at how well priced and how much value is in your plan compared to new business today, right? I think the side by side comparison is kind of undefeated in helping clients understand what they have. And because we gear our calculators to really show here's not just the pricing, not just the benefits, but combine it into a value metric, the insurance multipliers in many cases will be quite eye-opening. Always helpful to remind clients that we can make reductions in benefits and premiums, but we can never put them back. Yeah, it's a great point. It's a great point, Gene. And that's why I think this decision is such an important one, right? Because many folks who are receiving rate increases are folks who are nearing average claim age, right? Or at the very least have aged to a point where their likelihood of an extended care claim is much higher than when they purchased the plan, right? So the plan becomes so much more important to us the more we age, which is what makes these conversations so delicate, right? Our financial situation becomes, for many in the middle market, more delicate after we retire, after our working years, and as we get into our 70s and our 80s, right? So that's why I think it's really important to be that guide on the back end for that client and really help advocate for them and help them understand the logic side when they're feeling emotional, you know, because I think a lot of people will really, their first knee-jerk reaction is, oh, great, I have to pay a rate increase on this. I'm done paying premium into this plan, right? They're paying premium into something they haven't used yet. That's the nature of long-term care. We're going to put this policy in a drawer and hope we don't need it ever. But no, we're probably more likely to need it in 20, 30 years down the road, right? It is hard to keep paying the bill for that plan. And of course, that's why we exist, right? To have reviews with the client, to remind them about the importance of long-term care insurance to their financial plan, and to keep that first knee-jerk reaction from being the one that wins out, right? That's why specialists are so important to this type of insurance, because it's for something out into the future that we have to keep paying premiums for. I mean, at the end of the day, that's why consultants are important in insurance in general. So I think if you can take some of these best practices with you in your day-to-day when you're having these conversations, I think you will help reaffirm why the client made this decision in the first place. And it'll be an opportunity to pat them on the back and say, you made a great decision to purchase this when you did. And remember why we did this. And you're probably in the best spot you could be in for the planning that we did back then, right? So I think it can turn a very negative reaction into a very positive conversation. And at the end of the day, will reaffirm your value to that client. So that is all I have. Anybody have anything else that they want to add today? Best practices, tips, any experiences you've seen? Anything else before we maybe wrap it a little bit early with our short group? The ILTCI people get to have fun, so why don't we take an extra 15, 20 and find our own fun?
I did drop your article in the chat, Jason, that you did a couple of years ago for California Broker. It's pretty evergreen. So,
Tried
um,
to keep it to the principles. Yeah, and a
yeah,
lot of it
yeah.
I discuss here, but obviously with some time to sit down and think and write
Hmm.
it out, you'll get a bit more organized version of all of these thoughts. Appreciate that. Alrighty, well, if that's it, I think we'll set you all free. Thank you all for being here. We kind of created our own breakout session today, so appreciate the few of the crowd that showed up, and we'll be here this time next week, and maybe we'll get to hear from Mark and Wendy and some of the other people who went to ILTCI, and they can give us a little debrief on what they learned. So
Yep.
stay tuned and be well. We'll talk to you this time next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.